Oh, okay.
Well, good morning, everyone. We're on time. Let's go ahead and start the meeting. This is welcome to the Metro Plan Orlando Technical Advisory Committee meeting for the February 24th, 2023 meeting. I'll call this morning meeting to order, and I'm Bill Wharton, your chairman. And just a reminder for all TAC members, all meetings are in person now, so please show up so we can create a quorum and be able to take care of our business. And members of the public are still able to participate virtually through the link found on the online agenda. We have two opportunities for public comment. The first one is just before action items, and the second opportunity is just before the end of the meeting. Members of the public attending the person who wishes to speak will need to fill out a comment card and turn it into Lisa, sitting over on the left side, my left side, by the monitors. Those attending virtually will wish to speak at either the public comment opportunities. We'll use the raise hand feature in the Zoom screen, or if attending by phone, you can hit the *9 to be recognized. And we also accept comments before the meeting. And I'll turn it over to Slade for the agenda review.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. There's one quick change to the agenda today, and then I have a couple announcements. Item 5E. The I-4 Beyond the Ultimate project will not be presented by Catalina Chacon. In her stead, we have Mr. Hatem Aguib from FDOT District 5. Sorry if I've butchered your name, but no, okay, good. All right, and then a couple announcements. I'd like to announce the state of Florida's new Moving Florida Forward infrastructure initiative. Currently under consideration by the state legislature, this new initiative will accelerate 20 selected road and infrastructure projects around the state, 3 of which are within the Metro Plan Orlando area. For more information on that, you can find the link in item 9E in tab or of the agenda, or go to tab 3 of the agenda packet. And I believe we're going to hear a little spiel on that during the Beyond the Ultimate presentation as well. So lots of information sources at your disposal. Then lastly, I have a message from our communications team to pass along to you all. If you may remember last meeting, we kicked off our annual report committee challenge where we asked you all to share the annual report either physically or electronically as much as you could. And then the committee with the most shares would win a little prize. The Community Advisory Committee won the annual report challenge, so congrats to them. Better luck next year for us. I did though want to give some shout outs to Aaron Sturck, Mary Moskowitz, and Kelly Brock for kind of the group getting the top 3 number of shares. So thanks everyone. And also, if you see any members of the CAC talking bad about us, let me know. So, but that wraps up my announcements. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Lisa to call the roll for attendance. Thank you.
Abadantuano, Bates, Barden for Brock,
Here.
Carson,
Here.
Cash, Castelletto,
Present.
Castro,
Here.
Chester, Cornelison, Cologne,
Present.
DeVries,
Present.
Doig,
Good morning. Here.
Edie, Elliott Moore, Gold, Hardwick, present, Dredge,
Yeah.
Kane, Kamal, Prue, Lim,
Here.
Hopper from Moskowitz, O'Keefe, Allure, Pulliam. Richmond. Radzai. Sanders.
Here.
Sonorans. Smith.
Present.
Stirk. Here. Sudemeyer.
Here.
Wharton.
Here.
Mr. Chair, that concludes the roll call, and we do have a quorum physically present.
Good morning. I'm Taylor Laurent from Metro Plan Orlando, and I have some good news to share. So our Safe Streets and Roads for All application that we submitted last September was accepted, and we were awarded $3.79 million to assist us with developing Vision Zero Safety Action plans throughout the region. So very good news for all of us. So what that means, we'll be using the funding to develop one regional safety action plan, 3 county plans, and 19 city or town plans. So that way we're getting a top-down and bottom-up approach, just as we explained in the application. The anticipated components of each plan are listed on the slide, and while we'll be focusing on different geographic areas within each plan, so it's customized for each of our partners. At the end of this process, each of our jurisdictions will have a qualified Vision Zero Safety Action Plan that will allow them to apply for implementation discretionary grant funding in the future. So unlocking that additional opportunity for more funding. I know we're all very excited to get started. There are a couple things we're working on as we get ready to go. At Metro Plan Orlando, we are developing a project management plan to help us get ready and be organized for when we start working on 23 of these plans simultaneously. We're also working with USDOT to execute a grant agreement, so we're eligible to receive those funds, and that will serve as our notice to proceed to be able to get the work started. Now, what I'm asking each of you to do today is this next part. What can we do right now? You as our TAC members, I want you to go back to your offices this afternoon and figure out who your local point of contact will be for when this work does start. Who's your champion? Who is your project manager? Who's going to be working with us hand in hand to develop these safety action plans and make sure that the one for your jurisdiction is personalized to what you need. So we will be presenting more information as it becomes available over the next several months. Our next presentation, which we'll hopefully have more information for, will be at the Vulnerable Users Safety Working Group meeting on March 21st. So if you'd like more information, please tune in at that time as well. But I am available to answer any questions if you have them now. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I apologize, I look a little disoriented because I thought I was last on the presentation list, but that's okay. Every year we do an annual signal retiming program, and that is to update our signals to reflect changes in travel behavior, mainly in the demand. So I'm reporting on the results of the retiming from last year. So why do we do this? Again, to improve traffic flow, reduce intersection delay, reduce speeding. And we want to try and have additional benefits from the program beyond just moving vehicles. We want to help the other modes, pedestrian, bicycles, transit. This year, we had 17 corridors that we retimed in 7 intersections. This year, we did retiming in Seminole County and Orange County. We didn't do any retiming on Osceola County. So the corridors and intersections we retimed in Orange County are listed here. They're shown here graphically. And in Seminole County. Now, how many people remember doing, if you've ever done signal retiming, remember doing it with floating cars? Thank you, Shaq. I'm dating myself and looking around the room. I'm sure you probably don't remember doing it, with a stopwatch, sitting in a car just riding. But we have, over the years, we have moved this program from floating cars to Bluetooth. And now we're moving into the area of using connected vehicle technology to collect this data. So as we transition into using connected vehicles, we have checked to see if it measures up to what we've been using in the past to make sure we're still getting good and useful data. Some of the challenges we had earlier was sample size, because some vehicles on the road don't have that technology, so we're missing some folks. If you don't get, if you don't get captured, then you're not counted, right? You don't get any benefits, or you're not reflected in whatever comes out of the plans. So we did check, and so we do have a good useful set to do our evaluation of the signal retirement. These are the measures that we try and measure. These are the things that we want to see improvements in. And it's not always improvements in each one. It's a balancing act. You release some congestion in a portion of a roadway, and that congestion ends up somewhere else. Just happens. It's not planned, but that's just what happens. So this year, 59% of the quarters have shorter travel times. 94% of the quarters have reliable travel times. We had an increase in emissions. We also had an increase in fuel consumption. And there's a reason why some of that happened. 35% of quarters now have motor stopping fewer times. 29% individual intersections have less intersection delay. And 15% of pedestrians have less pedestrian delay. So benefit cost is usually the measure that we kind of use to see how well we've done. So we had an increase in travel time. The annual cost is usually around $1.5 million, but since we didn't do any retirement in Osceola County, we didn't spend as much. And the present value is 5.9 million. And we had a negative BC ratio. Now, one of the things I always use as a reflection on a poor score is it's not that bad. It's just an indication that you need to do better and figure out how you can do better. Always, having positive scores can mean that, you're not really having an effect on the entire region. And also, when we started this program, one of the things I did indicate was we won't always have these wonderful benefit cost returns. That's just reality. This is what I mean. When we first started doing this, these are the type of ratios we had. And you see how it's varied for various reasons too. The one story I always use is when before Sunrail, traffic was going north-south. Then when Sunrail, we had stations, so traffic started going east-west, and we had to change the signals to reflect that. There's some other things that have happened that we have to reflect in our signal timing. And initially, when we started, we wanted to have the roadways on a 3-year cycle. So we started with a portion of 436. In 3 years, we wanted to be able to get back to that portion of 436. Well, with changes in how people have, decided on how they want to travel, the pandemic, we could not necessarily stay on that kind of cycle. So, but we try to do the best we can. Another reason why we had a negative BC ratio is many of the roadways had schools on them. And so we wanted to slow traffic down to allow for access and egress to schools, as well as pedestrians. So that's reflected in the score. The impact of the pandemic. We collected the before data towards the end of the pandemic, and the after data when traffic came back with a vengeance. And that's not just with the signal retiming, that's on transportation in general. I mentioned the schools, and then in some quarters, we increased the pedestrian times. So, we have to slow down vehicles. And, I'll just make this point that, in the technology realm, a lot of that is geared towards moving vehicles. And we need to start thinking about how we can use, technology and TISMO strategies to benefit the other modes over vehicles. In most quarters, we saw a decrease in citizen complaints. So again, going back to those measures, we try and balance these interests. And it's not always perfect, but do the best we can. And I'm confident that, next year we'll see a positive DC ratio. And I won't game it, to make sure we have positive. But I'm confident. Again, this is, I think the pandemic certainly had a big part of that. And then again, if we're going to try and make our community pedestrian friendly, bicycle friendly, we want to, accommodate better transit, then that's what's going to happen. It's not about the car. So, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my presentation, and I will address any questions or comments.
Thank you, Eric. Any questions for Eric?
Thank you, Eric. I always love seeing the results of this study. I have a couple questions for you. First, how is it connected to the speed management network study that was presented at the Vulnerable Users Working Group?
There's no connection to that. When we were doing this, they were just starting, so we just couldn't connect.
Okay.
So we can do that in the future.
Yeah, I think next year having, taking a look at how we can use those two together to, if there's any opportunity for signal retiming to address the speeding issues identified in that network. And then as you were talking about the benefit and cost analysis, it seems like with the added goals to the program for speeding and improving that active transportation safety and comfort, that the benefit cost analysis is becoming less helpful in understanding the success of the program. Are there other ways to measure it in the future that would include those other goals rather than just traffic flow?
Yeah, we did a limited study on pedestrian, and that's in the infographic. And with the consultant, we started talking about what other measurements can we leverage this work for. And you're right, it's so far, historically, it's always been about moving vehicles. And what are the safety benefits we can get out of retiming? What are certainly the air quality benefits we can get out of retiming? I mean, there's other factors we can look at. And I mentioned it's a balancing act. We can improve pedestrian safety, but we're probably going to get some calls about, I'm sitting on the side street for 30 minutes. No, you're probably there for 15 seconds. It just feels like 30 minutes. But that's what happens here. But yeah, I agree with what you're saying.
Thank you. I think next year we have a better tool for understanding the benefits of the study than just the benefit cost. I think that would be great.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Chairman, and thank you so much, Eric, for the presentation. Definitely, there is a lot of value, especially for commuters as they are traveling through these heavy corridors if the signals are coordinated. My question is, the DOT, they are going towards some other intersection improvements, not only looking at the signal coordination, but also minimizing the number of conflicts within the intersection. So they have the concept of the R-cuts, the restricted crossing U-turns that they have. So they just implemented that on a string of signals, that is on a State Road 535 by Disney Springs. Then instead of having a full median, they had a series of directional median openings. So what it does is that you will allow the left turns from the main roadway, but from the side streets, you will go ahead and make a right to make a U-turn. So what it does, and I had the opportunity when I was at the DOT, we went to North Carolina and they had what they call the smart corridors. So they had probably 20 intersections where they use this approach that they have. So on a 4-lane divided, they had the capacity of a 6-lane divided because of the signal timing, but also it is safer for other modes of transportation. So my question is, I am advocating for the signal coordination, but are we also looking perhaps at some other things, especially the DOT, going outside the box in terms of their usual signal coordination, that they are implementing it in their corridors, that perhaps this can be an opening for the conversation. Maybe we can do these things. If you go to that corridor, the pedestrians are crossing diagonally, but you have enough pedestrian clearance for them to be able to. So there's a lot of merit perhaps to look at some of these options, perhaps.
Right, I received that as more of a suggestion, more so than a question, because we didn't look at the retiming with that type of treatment at an intersection. We didn't. Can we in the future? Yeah, anything's possible.
Yes.
Yeah. So again, I take that as more of a.
Well,
comment or
I'm just
suggestion.
asking that, are we also looking at some other ways to move vehicles besides the signal retiming and take a look at what the DOT is doing?
Well, I can't speak for the DOT, but I certainly believe in Tismo, we're always looking for other ways to improve mobility without adding capacity. That's part of what we're doing with our Tismo master plan. Looking at other strategies, looking at other certainly devices that we can deploy to improve mobility, improve safety, reduce delays, improve reliability. But I think your question is, did we look at the retiming in conjunction with that type of treatment? No, we didn't. If I understand your question correctly.
Yeah, well,
Because it was a question blended with some
yes,
some commentary.
yeah. I mean, it's just food for thought,
Okay.
because the DOT is looking, and that is part of their Tismo approach as well.
That called a Florida U-turn? Because you got a Texas U-turn. and then you got-
No, it's not a Texas U-turn.
No, I know it's not a Texas U-turn, it's
Yeah.
a Florida U-turn.
Yeah, well, no, that is a national
It's kind of,
program.
I'm trying to be funny.
Yeah, okay, all right. All right. So just tell me what to laugh to.
Thank you, Humberto.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you for, it's nice to see the different types of performance measures that you've got in the, that you're looking at. I did want to echo what Ms. Hardwick said on a couple things. And I don't know if it might be too soon to really understand. Were there any trends in, number of crashes on these corridors or severity of the crashes as traffic is able to move more quickly through the corridor or more efficiently? I think that's something, if we don't know, I would be interested in understanding that as we're increasing the efficiency of some of these corridors, what does that mean to, the any of those types of safety features? So I just wanted to echo that.
Yeah, and we have in the past looked at safety benefits of the retiming and they're minimal. And there's been a gentleman named Peter Yaw, who used to be, I think, the transportation director for Pinellas County. He did a paper that we've looked at. It's kind of dated, but we did look at it a couple of years ago. Laura Bach, who was here, and she was managing this program. She did take some samples and looked at it, and we just didn't see that, significant change in safety regarding crashes. So. You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. My presentation this morning is going to be pretty straightforward, talking about, first off, our history of doing pedestrian and bike counts, and then talking about what we're doing currently, and then dive in a little bit into the data. And I also want to talk about, with this committee, how do we expand upon what we're doing and collaborate with all of you to make this an even richer program. So just as Eric was talking about driving along with a stopwatch, well, we had something comparable with when it came to ped and bike counts of, somebody sitting out there in a chair and at an intersection. And yeah, it's a very accurate method, but you're very limited in what you can do from a time standpoint. And if you're not using volunteers like we were, then it's also quite expensive. So we did that for a couple of years, and of course, we learned some things in the process. The next step was the first generation of machine counters using eco counters, which were infrared. And so while they were low cost solution, easy to deploy, but you also had some limitations, right? Because it's infrared, you can't point it toward the roadway because you pick up all the heat signatures of all the motor vehicles. And it also doesn't differentiate between pedestrians and cyclists. And so you can't count cyclists on the roadway or tell how many of them are even using the sidewalk. But what we've moved to starting in 2019 was the MyoVision cameras. I know a few other jurisdictions have them as well. So for those who aren't familiar, it's a pole mounted temporary camera and battery pack and data collection system. There's enough battery power typically to do a 48-hour count. So we'll put them out on Monday or Tuesday, pick them up on Thursday or Friday. And then the data is uploaded to MyoVision for an AI analysis, giving us the count data. It's also capable of doing Bluetooth reading, so you could set them up in a cordon. We haven't used it for that. You can also do other modes. I think some of the other jurisdictions are using motor vehicle counts, but we're just doing ped and bike counts with them. You can also do turning movements, although we've been focusing more on mid-block and trail type of parallel movements. So again, because it's video, we can differentiate between pedestrians and cyclists. We can count cyclists in mixed traffic in the roadway. And from a bicycling and even pedestrian, to some extent, safety standpoint, understanding how many are going with versus facing the flow of traffic. So to give you an idea of what we've been working on over the years, first off was the bikeway crash risk analysis, and I presented to these committees a couple of years ago on the outcomes on that. Since then, we've been doing a number of baseline counts for projects that we know are coming to be built soon, complete streets and side path projects. Also sometimes looking at where we know some changes are coming in land use. So when we see how that would influence exposure. Continuing that into 2022. And now in 2023, we're actually starting to do some of the new facilities that have hit the ground. So we can do the after count. And because of some of the data analysis that we've done, we're looking at putting them out in some new locations for improving our exposure data for pedestrians, for doing better analysis. And just so you know, we still do have more room in our schedule for this year to do some more counts. So if anyone has any ideas, you can contact me on that. MyoVision, since everything is uploaded to them, everything is cloud-based, not a surprise there. And if you want access to the data, we can very easily send you a link to so that you can go into the system and see where the count location is, what paths are being counted, download the data, and do with it as you like. So exploring the data a little bit now that we've got about 55 locations that we've counted over the since 2019, being able to look at things more holistically. And so, for example, here looking at streets with and without bike lanes or side paths, see here that actually the streets without facilities are pretty comparable. On a number of these, you see I'm subtracting out Central Boulevard. This is in downtown Orlando. And so it's such an outlier compared to the other counts that we have that it really skews things. And you'll see here in the next, looking at the counts by context classification. And so as you'll recall, C6 is urban core, C5 and 4 are urban, and C3C and C3R more suburban. I think that Central Boulevard location, while it's technically in C5, is probably more of a C6 volumes for pedestrians and cyclists. But so we didn't put the counters out specifically for doing this type of analysis, but because when we started doing it, we didn't even have the context classification system. But we're finding more uses for the data as we go along and learning from the analysis. Looking at the context class and then the equity analysis zones, be able to slice it that way. So here looking at pedestrian counts, and then looking at bicyclist counts similarly. So interesting thing here, if you note that for bicycle counts, they actually will go up as it gets more suburban for bicyclists in the equity areas, and while conversely they're going down as it gets more suburban for the non-equity. And so if you think about it, as you get more suburban, that means your trip distances are longer, and therefore it's more likely to shift from a pedestrian trip to a bicyclist trip. If you are a low-income person, perhaps doesn't have access to an automobile. And so, whereas, the non-equity areas are definitely going to shift more to a car trip because, and for people who can afford cars. Also able to look at, for example, how bicyclists, how many are using the roadway. And again, here's looking at the equity areas. We saw fewer cyclists using the roadway, whether there was a bike lane or not, compared to non-equity areas. That'd be something interesting to explore with, some survey, some outreach. Anyway, so that's just a taste of what we can do from an analysis standpoint. And I guess, as I say, we're getting more data all the time and learning more ways to put this data into use. I want to, before I open for questions, I have a question for all of you. First off, how many of you are doing any sort of ped and bike counts, irrespective of technology? For your jurisdiction, okay. So Orange, Orlando, anyone else? Okay. And any other jurisdictions that have MyoVision, irrespective of what you're using it for? So I know the city of Orlando does. So Orange County, okay. And I believe we saw some in Seminole County. You have, okay. Okay. All right, so we'd like to get with you to talk about how we can collaborate on those as far as sharing the data and how we can expand upon our bike and pet counts and make this a richer program. So I'll be reaching out to you all on that. So I'll be happy to take any questions from the committee.
Any questions for Mike?
Yeah, thank you so much, Mike. I wanted to ask you, now with the use of micromobility devices with the scooters, are we also addressing and trying to count them? I know that in Orange County, the city of Orlando, of course, they have their own program, but we are putting an RFP so we can have scooters, probably have street vendors. So it's part of the process, but we know that that is a viable option and it's comparable either in between pedestrians and bicyclists. So I was wondering if we are also trying to capture the data with MyoVision, since we have the videos.
Mm-hmm. The current MyoVision, or this original version that we have, does not classify that way. I understand that there are new device just becoming available this coming month. Can do that. In a lot of the count locations where we're out in the more suburban areas, because we're doing everything regional, we don't see a whole lot of that compared to what you would see closer into the city of Orlando, Winter Park. So it's definitely something for consideration. And yeah, but currently we don't have that ability.
Thank you.
Go right ahead.
Hi, Mike. I was curious, where do we access the data from if we want to look at it? Is it uploaded online or can we get that directly from you?
Yeah, just send me an email and I can send you a link to the,
Awesome.
to
And
give you
then-
access to the data.
My second question is, we're not doing like holistic counts across the whole city, but we do work with Best Foot Forward and they do certain locations annually. Do you all already receive that data or is that something that we need to let you know is going on and kind of get that to you? Or is it something automatic at all their places that they do across all municipalities? You already get those counts?
I haven't seen, so Best Foot Forward is doing pedestrian counts in addition to their crosswalk yield
Mhm.
counts. Okay.
Right.
All right, well, yeah, we'll have to talk to them about
Okay,
seeing how we can integrate that.
sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you for this. Two questions. The city has gone through a similar history of counting technology, and I think we're at a crux where we're looking to start with a new technology for bike ped counts. So I'm curious if you think you'll be sticking with these types of cameras, upgrading to the new versions, or I know that there are software as a service companies as well that can integrate into CCTV intersection cameras. So curious about the future of the technology you're using.
Well, of course, because we're a planning agency, we're not doing permanent installations, right? We're doing, and yes, we're aware of some of the other technologies that are more suited toward the implementing the operating organizations, agencies. We have looked at the next generation of MyoVision. We haven't really determined whether it's something we want yet, but we're open to the discussion if there are, with this committee, with both of these committees, as to what the new technology can do and whether you all are interested in that if it would be worthwhile for us to invest in it.
And then my last question is, does your data roll into the state non-motorized user traffic count system as well?
I recently gave my all the data to the new coordinator. FDOT has a new ped bike count person specifically. So yeah, so he has access to all of that now.
Great. And that is available on their GIS website. So you can see the statewide counts.
Right. Yeah, because I just recently gave him the link to our data. So as to when they will be able to put it into their site, I don't know.
Thank you.
Any other questions? And forgive me, I know we have a couple of TISMO members here. Anybody, any questions from those members?
Did have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have a follow-up to Ms. Hardwick's question. You mentioned the possibility of looking at that new technology more holistically. And I think we all know the value of having like the same type of systems regionally. Is that something that we can look into as a strategy in Taylor's project with the grants that we just got with the Safe Streets for All, and maybe having that new technology be a strategy for implementation? And then as we seek those implementation funds, we possibly deploy that more regionally? Is that an approach that would add value to what you're doing, because that would increase the data that you have access to?
Yes, in fact, we've been talking about that not only from the Safe Streets for All program, but also the active transportation plan of looking at how we expand on it. And also FDOT has a program for permanent count locations. And they've been here and they've looked at a few locations, but we don't have any of theirs yet. But we're talking about, how do we expand upon that? How do we help FDOT implement that here in our region? And one of the benefits of having permanent count locations is you get the seasonality data, which we don't get from, a 48-hour count. So we can make adjustments based on that seasonality data.
Thank you. Thank you for thinking about that.
Mike, thank you very much. And good information. And up next is Alex Trotter. We'll be talking about the MPO planning process presentation.
Good morning, everyone. Just kind of following up to Mike's presentation before I dive into this content here. So whether it's the active transportation plan or the TISMO master plan, these are great opportunities to identify these project types, as we're looking at new CCTV, other new gizmos and gadgets that are inside the stainless steel box, those identifying those investments within these modal plans, we can then incorporate them into our long range plan and fund them and they are eligible expenses. So we could fund them using our SU or transportation alternative fund. So keep that in mind as we're developing both the active transportation and TISMO master plan. These could be projects that are multimodal and serve kind of all ends of our regional vision. So with that, that's kind of a good prelude into the MPO planning process. And I know we have some new members and some folks who probably weren't with us when we were in our last 2045 long range planning process for the 2045 MTP. So I'm just going to give a little status update about how we do business, what core products are going on, what we have going on right now, and then some recommendations as we move forward with this current year. So I think all of you have probably seen this in a presentation or two. We call it our bridge graphic, and I think it really visualizes how everything starts in our long range plan and our 2045 metropolitan plan. It's updated every 5 years. We had our board and committees unanimously approved that in December of 2025, or excuse me, December of 2020. And our next one is due December of 2025. So it seems far away. When you look at all the planning requirements, all the things that we want to do, the thoughtful analysis, we're starting now, and I'll talk more about that in a second. But it has to look far out, but it also has to be fiscally constrained. So when we talk about cost feasibility, we have to identify all of our needs, but also get to a ranked list that allows us to say, look at how much funds we have and which projects are going to advance based on that availability. And projects have to be in our long range plan, in our MTP, to be eligible for federal and state funds. So that is amended. As you've been part of the process, we do amend and modify, revise the long range plan as required. So it's a living document. So keep that in mind as we move forward. Second is our prioritized project list, our list of priority projects. This is our bridge. This is what takes the priorities from the long range plan, from plan periods 1 and 2 from our long range plan, and starts ordering them, what's on deck for the transportation improvement program. So this is categorized based on our board's SU funding policies. So we have a transit list, we have a bike ped list, we have a TISMO list, and we have a complete streets list. So that's consistent with our board's allocation policy. And we've developed criteria as part of our 2045 plan to evaluate those. What's important to note about the priority list in the TIP is they actually work together. So if there's a project funded in the TIP, the design, but nothing else is funded, those later phases are identified next steps in our priority list. So anything that's in the TIP, that's that phase unfunded, you'll see in our priority list. So it's really, we call it our bridge, but I like to think about it, what's on deck for those later years of the work program, because typically a priority list project or phase gets added to the last year of the work program as we're kind of priming the later years, where current year are things, projects and phases that have been on the books for sometimes decades. So with that, that's kind of our core planning products, absent our unified planning work program, which is our internal operating budget. But for purposes of today's discussion, this is our core products. And as we've developed that MTP, as you know, it's a very complex document. It's comprehensive. It addresses every mode, every facet, every topic, addresses all the federal requirements and expectations, and in doing so, it's about 900 pages. And as we're going through a federal certification right now, we see how important addressing each of those topics in detail is. But we've heard your feedback along the way. And in some cases, we've heard questions about funding distribution, questions about complexity. But the one I've heard most often, I think over the years, is you guys are moving so fast. Too much at once. Even when we're developing a long range plan on a 24-month schedule, as we're developing data and performance-based processes to evaluate every mode, it feels like it's all hands on deck and we're planning from the fire hose. So we've taken that into kind of our thought process as we're advancing some of our core plans, which I'll talk about in a second. Some other topics, some other considerations that are out there. I know each of you kind of are experiencing this, especially kind of our LAP program agencies, is the rising in material and construction costs. So, you know, we're seeing 20, 30, in some cases, 300% cost increases on projects, especially depending the project type, material, and materials that are being used, but we're seeing really significant cost increases. In current year, you know, things are de-escalating. I think that might be a term to use, but we're still likely going to see continued cost increases as we go into the next fiscal year. So we've been able to cover a lot of overages, and then there's one on the agenda later today, because we did receive, as part of the bipartisan infrastructure law, this current year, we received 2 fiscal years worth of federal funds. Because the IIJ was passed last year and DOT didn't allocate the funds to us, we actually had a nice reserve this year, which would have allowed us to do more. But based on the circumstances, kind of the unprecedented rise in costs, we had the reserve to keep and to stabilize the work program. As we move forward in later years, next year and into the 3rd year, we won't have that reserve. So this is kind of a heads up as we're looking into the LAP program. We have gone in, as we were working with DOT, and increased some of those construction costs up to the maximum limit of 4%, which is consistent with the Turnpike and Expressway Authority use. But again, without kind of getting into current year and the bidding and unit cost updates, and the details of every project, I can say wholesale, we're likely going to see another year of rising costs. I hope that's not the case, but I'll polish my crystal ball and go with that, just given all the case examples that we've seen here. And DOT presented on that as well as part of their work program presentation a couple months ago. So again, we heard a lot. There's a lot happening in current year, which just kind of puts us in flux. And then kind of going back to the too much at once. We took that to heart. I personally took that to heart. And I said, how do we accomplish all of these tasks? How do we go through all of these processes, but make sure that you and our partner agencies have adequate, sufficient time to engage, to participate, to add value, to make sure your projects, your needs, your desires are well ingrained in our plans. So we're taking a step back, and instead of doing it all as part of the 2050 plan and we launch and it's a big ordeal, we're going to start chipping away at the modes, at the topics, and especially the ones that need the most kind of focus on the front end. And Eric has presented on the TISMO master plan and Taylor on the active transportation plan. But as they've talked about in the past, those plans are really intended to get us that next generation of strategies, needs, and projects. And each of those plans is also developing a unique and specific prioritization approach to that modal category. So we heard that feedback last time, some questions about criteria, specificity, how applicability to each mode. How do we approach that? We didn't want to just rush to, let's make up a new process. Let's do this holistically as part of a long range planning process. And that's what we're doing with those two modal plans. We also have an ozone contingency and carbon reduction plan going on right now. Sarah Larson from our team has been managing that in partnership with UCF. A lot of, that focuses primarily on ozone, but there are new federal and state requirements as it relates to greenhouse gas and carbon reduction. And to address those requirements, we're going to be updating that plan to make sure we're hitting on those new expectations. And as Taylor talked about earlier, we're going to have a lot going on as it relates to safe streets planning, and that's going to identify a lot of projects which are going to be eligible for discretionary funds, but are also eligible for our other federal funds. So between the master plans that we have going on this year and the work that we have going on next year, it's really going to set us up for that real next generation of relevant, feasible projects that we can have on the books for years to come. And we'll also provide each of you those call for project opportunities to make sure that your needs, your desires are ingrained so they can become regional priorities. But next year, we're also going to be conducting a regional electric vehicle charging plan. We're supposed to do that this year, but we're going to be kicking that off a little later next year. Similarly, with some new federal guidance on transportation resilience and some of DOT's guidance that's going to be coming out later this year. We'll be preparing a regional transportation resiliency strategy. And that's really going to intend to provide guidance and framework as we're developing projects down the line. So it may not identify projects, but it's going to give us the strategy, the focus, and kind of the direction for us to incorporate that topic into later plans. Freight and good movement strategy, we incorporated a freight element as part of our 2045 plan. A lot has changed since then. There's some new data. The federal, our number one truck parking site is fully funded in the work program. So that's great news. What's next? We need to make sure we have our next set of freight priorities, bottlenecks, truck parking sites, safety issues identified so we can start identifying funding for them. Transit vision plan. This is something that we haven't, we're going to be working directly with Links on. And it's really just that, a vision plan, as part of the different initiatives that took place over the past couple of years. Links was able to prepare county level operational plans, with the understanding that if increased funds come, these would be the operations. We have that. We want to ingrain that into our long range plans. And also with everything that's going on right now relating to the Sunshine Corridor and other transformational transit projects, we need to make sure we have those lines on the map so we can plan towards that. And all of those things will feed in to those last two items. And then the last one's that complete streets and capacity management plan. So we're going to know what's constrained. We're going to know from the TISMO master plan where we want to improve intersections and where corridors are. We have challenged corridors. We'll have safety issues identified in that complete streets and capacity management plan. That's kind of a working title for right now, but really what that is, it's a modal plan intended to focus where are our next complete, when we say complete streets, how they've come to us in the past has really been more, you have a complete street, I have a complete street, and we've kind of added them to the list. But as we're looking about implementing projects, sidewalk projects, intersection improvements, in many cases, that's what a complete street is. It's a approach to improve the corridor by all means, for all modes. So that plan is going to start stitching together our TISMO plan, the active transportation plan, where it makes sense to identify those complete streets projects where we don't already have them on the books. So by the time we have all of that done, we'll kick off our 2050 plan. And the intent of that is when we kick that 2050 plan off, all we're going to do is take those needs. We'll have an 80% plan, and then we can focus on what's most important based on the uncertainties, based on a scenario planning exercise and based on a financial planning exercise. So we can look at funding strategy because we'll come into the 2050 plan already with needs, priorities, feasible projects, quality costs, great project descriptions, and then we can come forward as a group together and forge a plan that I think we can all come to consensus on. And I think it's going to be a longer burn, but I think it's going to be more fruitful and will allow each of you and your agencies to engage in our process more meaningfully. So what does that mean? We have a lot going on in those, and the Safe Streets for All kind of just doubles down on how much we have going on as a region, but a path forward for the current year. And as it relates to our long range plan, our MTP, I don't want to say it's kicked off, but indirectly it has with our modal plans, because the TISMO and active transportation plan do have a 2050 horizon and do focus on goal and objective setting. So the MTPs indirectly has been kicked off, but not formally. As it relates to our project priority list and in our TIP, it's our recommendation to maintain existing priorities as we go into this year. And a lot of that goes back to our concerns as it relates to the work program and ensuring that we're going to be able to stabilize the TIP and priority list. We don't want to add too much into fiscal 29, knowing that it might have to come out as things defer, kind of going into next fiscal year. We have a lot of high priority projects on the books, and a lot of the next phases are construction on those priorities on our PPL. So we're recommending kind of holding tight with those priorities, loading fiscal 8 and 29. But what's going to be new for the PPL, and we've presented to this group and to the vulnerable users group a couple months or last year now, they helped us identify a methodology and bundling exercise for critical sidewalk gaps. We identified that program in the MTP, and starting in fiscal 26, we're supposed to be allocating $1 million towards critical sidewalk bundles. So with that, this year, that's going to be our recommendation, and it's going to be an agenda topic on the vulnerable users working group at their next meeting, is to look at those bundles. I know as part of our active transportation plan, we did some outreach to kind of refine each of those, but that's going to be what we're recommending. The new addition to the priority list this year is those bundles, and so we can start programming them. And then again, as I mentioned before, developing the TIP is going to be really more of a focus on existing projects and stabilizing what we have based on those rising costs. So that's really all I have, but I'll leave it there for questions. More than happy to field those, but before we're going to go on like spring break here in a little bit. So we don't want to get kind of too far into summer season, which kind of gets into our adoption kind of mid-year, May, June, July cycle. So we just wanted to kind of put it out there, let you guys aware. And if there's any concerns, feedback, now's the time for us to pivot if necessary. But based on what we've learned from the past couple of years, feedback along the way, it is our recommendation to hold tight this year with existing priorities until we complete the master plans, modal master plans, and then we can incorporate those directly once we have consensus and board adoption on those items. So with that, be happy to field any questions you may have.
Any questions for Alex? Yeah.
Alex, yes, I have, on the sidewalk bundle projects, have we really seen anything on that? I keep on hearing about it. And they're saying, oh, we're working on it. I still haven't seen what that necessarily truly entails, what it looks like, what those projects are.
Yeah, I'm sorry you haven't heard, but we've been sending a lot of emails to agencies, so I can follow up directly with
Yeah,
you. But I know as part of the active transportation plan, we sent out a reminder, we extended the bundling review period.
Never heard that.
Yeah, I'll follow up. That went out to all of that went to our TAC distribution list, so I'll follow up with you directly. I know others participated thoroughly and provided a lot of meaningful feedback, so I'll follow up with you on that just to make sure. But I know we provided the review period, and based on the feedback we received, we actually pushed it out a few additional weeks to allow partners to provide additional feedback. But again, I'll follow up directly with you, but I know we used our TAC distribution list to ensure that y'all were engaged in that process. Vulnerable Users Working Group is going to be reviewing those bundles and talking about an evaluation methodology. So now that we have, 50 bundles, which one goes first kind of thing. So but I'll follow up with you directly, Shad, to make sure.
Include me in that follow-up too.
And certainly.
The
But
other
those were
thing is-
emails from Taylor, and I believe Slade may have sent the follow-up as well, just probably about a month ago now.
So it wasn't from you, so it was Slade. I'll look for it. The PPL, if we want to put a new project or any projects on that list, what is the status? And I mean, what is the due date, or what are we doing, or?
Kind of like years past, we haven't been doing call for projects. It's probably been 7 years since we've done a local call for projects on the PPL. So we're not doing a call for projects. All the
It seems like
projects.
projects get added every year, so.
Well, projects are added. Oh, that's not true. Projects are only added based on the first 2 plan periods of the adopted long-range plan. And the past 2 cycles have locked in those 2 plan periods. So there may have been a little shuffling amongst the projects. And that's what we're recommending, is we don't want to shuffle this year. There's too much at flux, too much in motion. We heard the feedback from last year. But we haven't added projects in at least 5 years on a call for projects. And that's where we want to use these modal plans. Those are the call for projects. Those are in the sidewalk bundles. That was the call for projects, to make sure we get it on early so we can evaluate it kind of comprehensively versus adding new stuff every year and kind of trying to shuffle the deck based on something new. Again, the priority list is intended to be the implementation of our adopted long-range plan.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. I just want to compliment you guys for all that you're doing to bring forward that data that helps have everything looked at equitably and based on the need of the actual location where the project is defined. And I guess my question is kind of a follow-up to Shad's question. His was focused on it moving off of the MTP onto the PPL. But because that happens more automatically now without a municipality submitting that call for projects effort, where we're pushing those projects forward and already acknowledging we're ready to go if they were funded, what is the process for when it goes off the PPL onto the TIP and ensuring that the municipality is ready to go with that? Or is there any looking at that and at that moment making a decision if it moves forward? Or is it just, if it's moving forward, if it's on the list, you got to get ready
And
be
that's some of the other feedback, and part of our reason for the pause is us shuffling the past few years created some uncertainty about partners. Am I next? Who's next? What's next? So we recognize that. I'm seeing that. Again, this is kind of us pivoting and trying to kind of reconcile that concern. We're loading fiscal 28 and 29 this current year based on the priority list. So agencies are going to have a 5-year, 4-year heads up. And I think those who kind of learn to participate in the lab process understand what we do every July is when we take our priority list with DOT and we start actually programming 28 and 29 and we start developing I don't like to call it the 4P application of years past, but it's really an input application for DOT. They don't call it 4P anymore, but it's a project intake form. And we're prompting our partners when it's time to fill that out. That's been another cause of confusion along the way. It's before we were having everyone fill out these applications because DOT had required everyone to fill out the applications. And then you thought, there was an expectations management challenge of, I filled out the form, am I next? Well, it's like, well, they made us have you fill out the form but we kept it in the file. So now if we're asking you to fill out the form and Taylor and I are kind of prompting the form, kind of starting the fill out, you'll know you're next 5 years in advance of the funding flow. And something else that Taylor and I are working on is showing that bridge in a more specific way. So, the TIP is a 5-year planning document based on funds. Only the first 3 years are actually locked funds. The last 2 years of the TIP are kind of assumed revenues. They're not locked in. But what we want to do just to kind of provide kind of a project management plan and phasing plan for you guys is to take the TIP and almost develop an illustrative next 5. So, and that will be part of our priority list just to kind of show you, you're next for design, but are you next in 29, in 30, or 31? So that's where we're trying to develop kind of some tools and some visualizations that will help our partners know when they're next and to show that phasing process of, we can only fund design and construction under the LAP program. So the preliminary phases have to be advanced by our partners. And that's where we're here to kind of help advance some of those phases as well. So I'll leave it at that. I know it's long-winded, but we go from priorities to scheduling. So once you're a number one priority, and I think, Shad, great example, the long-run project, once you're a high priority and you're there and there's a reason for the needing to get put, the schedule changes, something happened, right-of-way challenge, I need this sign off. You're still a high priority. We don't send you to the back of the list. It becomes a scheduling exercise of taking high priorities and understanding, is it this year, next year, based on available revenue, based on what DOT calls budget for the different planning phases. So it's I don't want to call it a puzzle, but that's part of what we're trying to identify the highest priorities so we can then work with DOT to get money on them.
Right, and you're saying you will need something, it's not as detailed as the 4P, but as it moves off the PPL onto the TIP, you'll be coordinating with us getting.
Yeah,
the
we will be
information that we
asking
need.
for that and a lot of planning. And I think, maybe partners have filled that out pending the step of the process. If you're coming in for design, you need a certain level of information. But if you're coming in for construction funds, obviously you need a whole nother packet and a whole lot of other right-of-way certificates and other environmental permitting sign-offs and other things that have to be addressed. But if it's just kind of starting, kind of getting an FM number, starting kind of entering into the work program, the rigor is not too much, but I would say it's still about 4 or 5 hours of local time per application to make sure that you got everything right. But again, we're talking multi-million federal funds. So we want to make sure our partners are committed before they enter the LAP program.
Thank you.
I just wanted to applaud and underscore what you're saying about the building in tools in this process so that we're ready to initiate these projects from that sort of PPL to TIP and then TIP to procurement and all of that. The challenge, other than our increasing costs, I think a lot of us are facing is the turnover and the churn in the workforce right now. So some of these projects were put in by folks who are no longer with our agencies, and having those tools so that those don't slip through or we don't miss a important deadline for an RFP review from the LAP program and all of that is so crucial. So any bumpers that y'all provide for us on that is so helpful. Thank you.
And every email you guys get from the LAP group, I get copied on. So just imagine Imagine that. As you were smiling, I was kind of
Yeah,
thinking
yeah.
about that.
I mean, DOT kind of surprises us on the RPs. We find out 2 days before it's due and say, oh, we're gonna give you 2 more weeks. It's like, we never even looked at this whole thing. So, then we
And
try
some
to
of
get it
that's
done and
outside-
check the whole thing. So.
And some of that's
sorry.
outside of our MPO process,
Yeah, I
but you
know.
know, we're
But
here to help you. So
knowing
we're rowing
that
with you.
that's there and we're looking at a wrong list that we thought it was another year out and they're telling us, oh no, it was due tomorrow and it's just something's got to be better there with that warning. So. Yeah.
Thank you.
Make sure it's okay. It's working now. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity for us to come today to present, give an update on I4 Ultimate. If I can fix this one, okay. This presentation was provided to the board, I think February 8th, but we're here to give the update. We'll talk a little bit about the background on the I4, what we're working on. We'll talk about traffic assessment, project development, and next steps. We'll also touch on the governor's announcement with the Moving Florida Forward initiative. Background on the I4 corridor. If you look at the exhibit to the left of the screen, that's the I4 corridor. In the middle, you have I4 Ultimate in the gray color. Recently, construction complete and open to traffic with the express lanes in both directions. North of I4 Ultimate, we call that I4 Beyond the Ultimate North. South of I4 Ultimate, we call that I4 Beyond the Ultimate South. The north goes into Seminole, Volusia counties, and then the south goes into Orange, Osceola, and extends into Polk County. The major challenge with those Beyond the Ultimate segments has always been the funding. Each of these segments, costs hundreds of millions of dollars each and over $1 billion in some cases. So while we continue to look for funding opportunities, we always looked at what, the need that's out there now with the funding available, and we came up with what we call a phased approach with the near-term improvements. So I'll go ahead and go over those near-term improvements, the projects that we actually have funding for on the next slides. Starting with Orange County. So we have 4 projects lined up that we have funding for. Starting from the top is the I4 at Sand Lake Road Interchange project. The project is improving Sand Lake Road, Turkey Lake Road, as well as I4 in that location. The project has been awarded last month, and we expect that to start construction as soon as March or April, so next month or the months after. Second project from the top is the 528 ramp widening. If you're traveling on I4 from the downtown direction going, and you take that off ramp, the 528 off ramp towards the airport, right now it's a single lane. What this project will do is widen that to 2 lanes. The project is in active design as we speak, and we expect that to go to construction summer of this year. Third project from the top, or second from the bottom, is the I4 at Darrell Carter Parkway interchange. We're building a new interchange at that location. The project is in active construction as we speak. It was awarded last year, so construction activities are going on. And then the last project at the bottom is the I4 at 535 interchange improvements. We're improving the western portion of the interchange, as well as improvements along 535 itself. So those are the projects that that project is in procurement. We expect to go to construction summer of this year. In addition to those projects, we are building a single lane express lane in the westbound direction that's going to be broken down into pieces. It will be built part of the project I just talked about, just based on the applicable location. So that single lane express lane in the westbound direction will be connecting I4 Ultimate all the way down to just west of the 536. Moving on to Osceola County. Osceola County, we had the Champions Gate DDI interchange improvement project recently completed and open to traffic with the partnership with Osceola County. We also have the aux lane projects. We're adding an aux lane in each direction from Champions Gate to 429. The project is in construction as we speak. We expect the construction for the aux lane to be finished the end of this year. We also have some milling and resurfacings that are currently in design. So those are the projects that we have in Osceola County. So while we're working on those near-term improvements, we continue to look for what's next, right? So in case the funding becomes available, we need to know where we're going next. You know, what is the next project available, or where's the next project that's needed on I-4? We looked at I-4 for in the south and the north. And what you're going to see in the next couple of slides, we put together a heat maps that is derived from FHWA national data set. It collects information from a fleet of probe vehicles equipped with mobile devices, and it's able to detect the time and location for those vehicles, and then hence the speed, which is a very good indication for the congestion. This data is available, it's collected 24 hours, 7 days a week. So it's very good as an indication for the speed along the corridor. So moving on to the heat maps. So we'll start with the westbound direction. A lot of colors on the screen, but really if you look at the legend, the dark red is, you know, a speed from 0 to 10 miles per hour. This particular heat map is a weekday from 3 to 7, and you can clearly see the speeds on I-4. You know, there's significant congestion within Osceola County within that time. If I go to the next slide, Friday from 3 to 7, this is the same congestion. You're talking about speeds from 0 to 10 miles per hour. Moving on to weekend, 3 to 7, same problem. So clearly there's a problem there in that area. And honestly, if you personally drive down there, you know, you will know, you can definitely relate to this data. In the eastbound direction, we do see some congestions within Osceola County. We also see some congestion in Orange County in the eastbound direction. So this is a weekday between 3 to 7, Friday between 3 to 7. And this is the weekend between 3 to 7 as well. Again, the data is available. I think, you know, we have it from 2019. You can slice it and dice it the way you want, but it's a good indication. It's easy to explain the congestion issues we're having on I-4. So based on the data that we showed, we know that there are improvements needed along I-4, you know, everywhere. But we know for sure that the Osceola County segment has severe congestion and needs, you know, improvements. We also saw some congestion along I-4 eastbound within Orange County. So the focus area really is that Osceola County and just portions of Orange County. We'll talk about project development. So again, with the focus on Osceola I-4 within Osceola County. So that's kind of just the limits. I talked about the PD&E segments. You know, we continue to look for opportunities, updated guidance, new parameters that was not available during the PD&E. So, you know, throughout the years, we've been looking to see what's new, what can be improved, and, you know, looking for cost savings. Also looking at industry feedback as far as like sizes of projects and delivery methods. We tried as much as we can to maintain the purpose and need from the PD&E, also stay within the PD&E identified right-of-way, so no additional right-of-way. Also focus on improving the traffic operations and cost savings, like I mentioned. So the result of this is what you see on the screen is the proposed typical section for I-4 within Osceola County. So we're looking at adding 2 express lanes in each direction. The express lanes will be buffer separated, you know, compared to I-4 Ultimate. You see today it's barrier separated. So we're looking at the buffer separated option. The buffer separation allows for less footprint and then hence cost savings. It's easier from a constructability standpoint. It's better for emergency operations. It's been used nationwide and within Florida as well. So this is the typical section that we're proposing within Osceola County. And if you see in the middle of the typical section, we're preserving the rail corridor in the median of I-4 within Osceola County. So this is just talking about the limits. So within Osceola County, we're going to hit those interchanges and we're building the express lanes. So, one question will come up, well, okay, if you're going to improve that piece, what do you do? How do you tie that to, on the northern limits and the southern limits? How do you tie that to I-4? So we'll have to look into transitioning, that into Orange County and to the north, and then to Polk County to the south. Polk County will be extended the express lanes in both directions through Polk County. So two express lanes, east and westbound. For Orange County, we will be proposing a single express lane in the eastbound direction. So I talked about the westbound express lane earlier in this presentation that's being built, part of the projects as we speak. We're gonna go ahead and build a single lane express lane in the eastbound direction to connect the Osceola County segment all the way up to I-4 Ultimate. This slide just talks, just the limits of those improvements I just mentioned. So Osceola County segment, the I-4 eastbound express lane, and then the Polk County express lanes. The rendering you see on the screen is the proposed typical within Orange County. So the eastbound express lane buffer separated, that will be new, that's proposed. The westbound express lane is currently being built, part of the 3 projects I talked about, Sand Lake Road, Darrell Carter, and 535. One thing we want to point out here in the Orange County section, we're assuming the rail corridor east of I-4. So just something we wanted to point out. In addition, some of you may heard the Poinciana Parkway extension also is ongoing. It's a turnpike project. We are in close coordination with them. This Poinciana Parkway extension will connect to I-4 within Osceola County as well. So we are in close coordination with them on that. As far as next steps, we'll continue to engage the stakeholders, just do the outreach and get feedback from the stakeholders, ongoing partnership with Turnpike, coordinating the projects, Poinciana Parkway extension with District 1, Polk County on their I-4 segment, Osceola County, Old Lake, Wilson Road. We also talk to Brightline, coordinate with them on a monthly basis. Securing the funding, I'll touch on that with the next slide with the Moving Florida Forward initiative. And also we're going to look at delivery methods, what's the best way to deliver those projects, and continue the coordination with Central Office and Fair Highway. Now moving into the Moving Florida Forward initiative, the governor announced January 30th this infrastructure initiative, $7 billion to accelerate about 20 critical projects within the state of Florida. This is very big, and it's a significant announcement. About $4 billion from general revenue, and then we will leverage using some innovative financing options, the other $3 billion. So total $7 billion. I think there's a video after this slide. Pretty exciting stuff. So this map shows all the 20 projects that are part of this Moving Florida Forward initiative. If we just zoom into our area, Central Florida, so we have, again, the I-4 at, this is the I-4 within Osceola County segment, about $1.45 billion, construction year 2024. Also, the Polk County segment of I-4, which is right adjacent to the Osceola County segment, about $635 million, 2027 funding. And then finally, the Poinciana Parkway extension, the Turnpike project, about $1.3 billion, 2027 construction year. I just want to point out that this has to pass legislation first. So I think they're in session as we speak. So that has to pass before we can see the funding. So if that happens, then the funding comes. So this is a list of all the projects. If you search Moving Florida Forward on the internet, there's a website with all this information. And of course, I'm sure this presentation is available for everyone. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions? I guess not.
I have
Oh,
just
okay.
a comment. I'd just
Right,
like to
Riley.
thank DOT for this turnpike, for this initiative that it means a lot to us. For the work with you all on this, moving it forward.
Thank you.
Aaron had one as well.
Yes. Thank you so much for coming. You have a very calm and soothing voice, and sometimes a lot of the presentations and the information that we get here kind of runs together. We've got long planning periods and long processes. But I just wanted to comment, Catalina came here several times over the last several years. And as they pared down that project and tried to keep it inching forward, you could see how hard everyone was working on it. And we peppered them with questions and tried to have them explain why they couldn't do more. And it was really limited to the funding. So this is a huge moment. And I'm really grateful for DOT recommending these projects to be prioritized for that funding. And it's such a huge opportunity for all of Central Florida because everybody's using these corridors to get through. So congratulations to the whole region for this. This is a huge deal for us. Thank you.
So I'm in Seminole County, so I do drive those segments way too much, but I'm still concerned about the segments up in Seminole. And so I was kind of curious, what is the status of those? And I would like to see the same, have you done the same heat maps and so forth for the Seminole County segments? I would love to see those, get a copy of those.
Yeah, yeah.
That'd be good.
Yeah. Thank you for the comment. Yeah, that's a very good point. We do actually have the heat maps for the north. There was a request on that, so we can get that to you. As far as the north, we're doing the same approach. So we're looking at where we're going next. Segment 3 within Seminole County is actually funded for right-of-way. So, and we are purchasing right-of-way as we speak, which makes that segment, one, if the funding becomes available, that's a good segment to, just go to construction. Also, a couple of years ago, we did replace the E. Williamson Bridge. The E. Williamson Bridge replacement was needed for the BTU project because we had to widen that bridge. So
Right.
BTU, so that's already done. But as far as next year, we were looking into that, and as soon as we gather information, we'll come back and present that.
Yeah, that middle segment there from the E. Williamson
Yeah.
Bridge up to Lake Mary Boulevard.
Yeah.
It seems like it's bad every day, PM, AM. So that's the segment there that I was even thinking of. I'd like to see the heat maps for that, see what it really is looking like. I don't know if I don't think it's as bad on weekends, even though recently I've driven a few times on a Saturday or Sunday and it's been much worse than it used to be. So I was just kind of curious. So thank you.
Yeah.
And the Osceola stuff is amazing. So, because I've been driving it way too much because my parents are over in Tampa and it needs so much down there. So it's pretty exciting.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. Kathy said that Hazem has his hand raised on the attendee side. He's on the virtual side. So can she promote him in for his question? Okay, go ahead, Kathy.
Good morning. Thanks, Hatton, for a good presentation. My question is related to the Orange County segments, 1A, 1B, and 2. Are you still planning to go to the original plan with the Beyond Ultimate project, which includes two express lanes?
Yes, Hazem, thank you for your question. Yeah, that is correct. The ultimate or the beyond the ultimate plan is the express lanes, two express lanes in each direction, which is the PD&E concept. But again, it's really depending on the funding that becomes available. So to answer your question, yes, that's still the plan.
Yeah, my concern is the schedule because if the Osceola County project goes first and now we have the I-4 Ultimate project with the same configuration to the north, we're creating a bottleneck in the middle. So that can be a concern.
Thank you for your comment. We can share with you, Hazem, the traffic analysis, but yeah, we have to make sure that the express lanes with the transition, the single lane to I-4 Ultimate from a traffic standpoint, meets the operational needs. So.
Thank you.
I guess I have a follow-up to Hazem's question, if you don't mind. You've had that slide on there with the cross section in Orange County. This is something I've asked along the way. Is what we're doing today allowing for that transition when the funding comes forward without making major changes in the future? Like the changes we're doing to add that one eastbound tube lane, can that transition into the 4 additional express lanes in the future?
Yeah, that's a good question. We always keep in mind the ultimate condition when we're doing those, near-term improvements. So yeah, we take that into account. So if the funding for the Beyond the Ultimate segment in Orange County becomes available, then we can still build that. Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Move into public comments on action items. We'll actually call them, provide a name and address. Comments, 2 minutes left. Kathy, we have any virtually?
There are no hands raised on the virtual side, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Lisa, do we have any cards?
I have not received any.
Thank you very much. And Slade, did we receive any written comments?
We have not.
Okay, enough for that. On to action items. Our first one is for approval of the January 27th, 2023 TAC meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve. Shad Smith.
Thank you.
Second.
And a second. Oh, thank you. And any discussion, comments? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that passes. Thank you very much. The next one is the FDOT amendment for FY 22, 23 through 27. And Jason Sartaro will present that.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Jason Sartorio, Transportation Planner with Metro Plan Orlando. This morning, I have one tip amendment for you. Additional information regarding this amendment is located in tab 2 of your agendas. This morning's amendment is due to increase construction cost estimates for Fortune Road and Simpson Road intersection improvement project in Osceola County. As I mentioned earlier, additional information regarding this is located in tab 2 of your agendas. That being said, if there are any no questions, we recommend your
Any questions?
we are recommending your approval of the amendment. Thank you.
Okay, do I hear a recommendation for approval to the board?
Kane, motion to approve.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Any comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? All right, thank you very much. Thank you. And let's see, we have no TAC only presentations. There are some general information in your packet. Next upcoming meetings are the Metro Plan Board itself on Wednesday, March 8th. And our next meeting is Friday, April 28th. And the Metro Plan Federal Certification Public Meeting will also be held on March 15th. Any comments from the members before we adjourn? Very well. And this is our second comments from the public. And Kathy, do we have any for just general comments?
No, there are no hands raised on the attendees side, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Lisa, anyone?
No,
Um,
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And no written comments?
No written
Okay.
comments.
Last chance, no other comments? This meeting is adjourned at 11:30.
Oh,
Seems like you're only with that.
Yeah. Bill?
You're very welcome.
It's like, I guess I kind of